the business paradigm is very different than the one that existed, when I was 15 years old, sitting on my bed listening to Yes songs.
Welcome to this Prog Chat. I'm Dean Wolfe, and we have a guest today who is a prog rock musician, and his name is Kurt Michaels, and he's in Chicago. Hi, Kurt. How you doing?
Not bad for Friday.
And he's got a brand new album out called Stones from the Garden. Links down below in the description and whatnot about your new album. You mentioned it took 7 years to record. Why don't you give us a little background there?
Well, I mean, you got to pay for it, and I think that life gets in the way. It was in the process of learning how to edit my wedding band demo that I started playing around with it, and literally the next thing I knew, I had my first CD. The second CD had to, I was still doing weddings and corporate events at that time, but I was, wanting to get out and perform, and so I put together a little rig, a looper, multi-effects, Boss multi-effects, pedal board, an EBow, and I was off to the races with that. And most of what I did was duets with a keyboard player. And in fact, the last track on Stones from the Garden is one of those. That was recorded in 2007. Electro Music Festival was from our performance there. I put out a live CD in 2006, so this didn't quite make it on to that CD. That was like 78 minutes. I wouldn't have had room anyway. One of the people that bought my first CD was the lawyer for the Sin to get their immigration set up to tour in this country. That was Chris Squire's original band that he was in before Yes. They were, coming to the US, and the lawyer that was setting up the paperwork happened to buy my CD. So I naturally asked if I could get a hookup, and I wound up talking our way on to opening a few shows in the Midwest for them. I'd already archived a bunch of live performances, and we in 3 of the tracks that are included on Outer Worlds would include one of the shows, everything that we did in one of the shows when we opened for the Sin. There's a 43-minute song on there too, by the way. If you like long songs, it's called One, and the reason we called it One was because it was for the concert series at a public library, and then we got there, they said, "Well, we forgot to advertise. Nobody's going to be here. Here, here's your money." And we said, "Well, no, we kind of want to play." And so we literally, we played for one person, and that's why we called it One. And I mean, the moon was in line with Jupiter that night, and it just, I knew that we had something, and that's what made me decide, I should do a live compilation. And that one's included on there. And then in 2008, my brother passed away, and very shortly after that, and I probably just like you was sitting around with a guitar in my hand. It was kind of like Close Encounters of the Third Kind. I started playing this chord sequence, and I couldn't stop. I didn't know why, and I kept going at it and going at it. I'm thinking, maybe I have a song here, and I hadn't done a whole lot of songwriting to that point. I had, in my past, I had done it at various points in time, but had never really done anything with it. But this time was different. Next thing I know, okay, I got a melody for that little motif, and what words fit that melody. And the first thing I free associated was, I know you can hear me. And so I immediately knew, oh, I'm writing about my brother. And it literally, from that point on, the song wrote itself. I had the whole thing sketched out like in 24 hours. So I knew I was on a mission
Hmm.
to write songs.
Mhm.
Go into the singer-songwriter rock band kind of mode. Another thing that you need to know about me, I started on social media in the mid 90s,
Mhm.
in its infancy, and I was participating music forums that were germane to the music that I enjoyed. But it was in this day and age, it was a lot of prog.
Mhm.
And so I got involved in some of those platforms with the idea in mind. I'm going to network my way through this. I'm going to make some friends. And it took me a while, but as you know, I sold that lawyer guy a CD, and it just things like that when you put yourself out there kept happening. It
Right.
took a while,
Mhm.
but in one of the Facebook friends that I wound up making was a guy named Michael Sherwood, um, who's Billy Sherwood's brother, uh, the bass player from Yes, the current bass player with Yes. And I mean, the guy was hilarious, and he wound up introducing me to Billy. And so it was, he and Michael, both were on that track. Didn't get to say goodbye. It's the name of the track. And I think Billy was playing drums on that one. Uh, he's known as a bass player, but he's also a really, really, really good drummer.
I didn't
Uh,
know that.
um, and he plays guitar too. I mean, he's a five tool kind of guy. I don't think there's anything, that he doesn't have some expertise.
Right.
He's a great engineer. He does it all. But anyway, wound up getting he and his brother, on a bunch of tracks from that CD. And, both of those guys, I barely had to tell them what to do. You know,
Mhm.
a brief, I provided charts, so there was a roadmap and I gave them a general description of what I wanted. All those tracks on that CD were started out with me doing a scratch vocal and a guitar, rhythm track, and everything was layered over that. First going to Billy, he'd put the drums on and had one of the guys that had been playing with me forever, here in Chicago, was doing the bass, and then it was Mike Sherwood doing the keyboard stuff, and it was everything. There was nothing that was with more than one person in a studio somewhere on this planet, um, doing what they did. Wound up getting Tom Brislin uh, on the record as well. Again, it's social media is what uh, created all those opportunities. Uh, there's no way sitting here uh, that I would have been able to do that kind of networking.
Mhm.
And I think when I started that record, I was thinking, I'm going to make a Beatle record. You know, if the Beatles were around, what would they be doing today? Because they were such a big influence on me. And I think I'm into songwriting. Uh, and they certainly could write songs. Um, Interestingly, their influence and guys like Brian Wilson, their influences, started going backwards from that, and it wound up being Great American Songbook, where I probably academically learned the most about harmony, about melody, and so it's on that CD, where I started, bringing that stuff in. But the influences as far as the treatment was, Beatles, Yes, Pink Floyd, whatever jazz influence, it's all mixed in in there.
Hmm.
Uh, but the songwriting probably has just as much great American songbook, influence as all of that. I just, when I was a kid, I couldn't stand it because it was all like the Lawrence Welk show and Liberace. The way that it was being presented didn't resonate with me. But when I'm listening to Brian Wilson, and that resonated with me. The way that he was doing it, or some of those great arrangements that George Martin, helped the Beatles out with. How
Hmm.
can you not? That stuff resonates, and I think that that's what I carried forward. But I think the initial intention with that was to write, a modern day kind of Beatles record, and I think truthfully the music suffered because of that, and I think that my process for recording it suffered because wasn't playing with anybody. Didn't have that energy of being in the same room with other people and working stuff through. And so on Stones from the Garden, we definitely resolved not to let that happen again and to let other influences, creep and not contrive it to be a modern day, Beatles thing and just letting it be me uh, with that. And I think that I'm a lot happier with the way that worked out. But yeah, I had a core group of people here in town that I was working with. Jim Gully and Len Szymanski have been, and Kathy Mills for that matter. Uh, I've been working with going back 30 plus years in every kind of job that you can do. And Len in particular, when you're talking about, a more proggy influence, uh, there's a way of approaching that, with the bass and the drums. Uh, and I totally, give him the credit, for setting that the way that it should have been set. But we had, some great players. Uh, in the bass chair, had Dennis Johnson, who was the original bass player with Survivor. Scott Williams played on most of the tracks, and he was leading ensembles for the U.S. Navy. He knows his stuff, and he was on most of the tracks, including he played upright on Happiness, which if you go back and you listen to that, you'll see why that was a really good idea. And then John Abbey, local legend, studio rat kind of a guy. Uh, it's on the thing we have Annie Carlson doing some of the singing, Kathy Mills, who I mentioned. Uh, and for sure, want to mention Corey Hance, who helped out with some background vocals. And we couldn't get John Abbey to be in the Forever video, so Corey mimed the performance in the video for that. And then we had Amanda Lehmann from Steve Hackett's group, did some amazing things. She duetted with Billy on Forever, did kind of a canon kind of a thing, with Billy on that one. And then she took the coda on Relax, Nothing's Under Control. And that was right in the middle of COVID, and everybody was doing their thing separately, at least for the video part of that.
I'll have
Yeah,
to
it's a
check out the video. I haven't seen the video actually. I've just been listening to your album.
oh, okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, this was a different. Every record was made with a different intention and consequently a different process. But I think that the process that we used on this one was more band-like, at least in setting the tone for the track.
Listening to your album is this, you mentioned the songwriting is important to you, and I definitely caught that right away, that there was a serious degree of consideration as far as songwriting. In other words, some music you can listen to, you go, hey, that sounds great, but then after a while you kind of you're not so impressed because there's not enough substance to it. But I noticed right away your songs had good substance, good bones, you might say, so that almost you could dress them up in any style almost, that you've got the good bones there, the good structure. Really interesting album. One of the things really enjoy about the album is your guitar playing. You're playing guitar most of the time, right?
all the time.
Yeah, all the time. And you have a very nice, broad style. It reminded me a little of Steve Howe, a little of Alex Lifeson, who are two of my favorites. And also the way you incorporated all the backup vocals, especially the female vocals. Just it all felt really luxurious. It just had a really sweetly produced album. Yeah, it's a really cool album. I was really impressed. Your vocals are very unique, enjoyable to listen to. It took me a minute to get used to your vocal. I wasn't sure of your vocal right away. I'll be
Me
honest there.
neither.
But that passed quickly. And it's interesting that you mentioned you've got the previous solo albums because I haven't heard them yet. The album that you wrote about your brother, which album was that again?
Soaring back to earth.
That's nice. So that's a very personal album. How do you feel about this new one? How do you feel you've progressed as far as a songwriter and making albums?
It's really the treatment, the arrangements, and is where I think I'm being a little more true to myself. We get criticisms, and one of them, about the last record was, yeah, it's really mellow. Um, and I'm really, you know, did not have that as an intention. There's a lot of factors, in that production that contributed to that, and I was determined that that wasn't going to happen. That it was not going to be as ambiguous, as to where I might be coming from. That's really songwriting. I think you get better. Every time you do something, you try to learn from your mistakes. I think my mistakes were production mistakes on the last one, and you know, you try to learn from them when you move on to the next thing. And yeah, it took a while. After soaring back to Earth, I decided, okay, we'll go try and take it out and play. Chicago's a big town, but there's really not much of a scene for the kind of thing that I do. We did get some opportunities to open for some national acts. We opened for Carl Palmer and some others with that, which were, nice opportunities. Really, most of the work, you're working for a nightclub, and your value to them is how much, the cash register is ringing, and how many times, because it's not like when you're with original material, I don't have 100 tunes, that I can rotate, from night to night, worked up with whoever happened to be playing with me at that time. And after 8 years of doing that, COVID hit, and that was the sign from above that this needed to be over. You can't keep dragging the same people out, and expect them to show up and pay too much for their beer.
Mm-hmm.
So I decided with this one that I was going to take a different approach, and instead of worrying about Chicago, start pointing it out at the world. We will be doing, we'll see how it goes, a full-blown streaming event, a live stream, and we'll see what opportunities that creates. I mean, I'm really not interested in touring. I don't want to, I'm too old to be living out of the back of my car or somebody else's car.
Yeah.
And, you got to convince people to do this stuff. I can't do it by myself, and I think that the idea of a band, it doesn't seem possible to have a band the way that these things are kind of unfolding. I think that as a musician, and this is something that probably doesn't get brought up very often, when you're a musician, particularly if you're gravitating toward leadership, in the musical situations that you're involved in, half of your job has nothing to do with music. It's about selling, selling yourself, marketing yourself, or selling whatever it is that you're doing. Nothing happens until something gets sold. And I think that the only reason that I've lasted as long as I have is not because I'm this awesome musician. I think, that it's because I could sell. I was ambitious enough or crazy enough to put myself out there, and keep nagging people to listen. I think that that's really what it comes down to. And I think that, here this is 2023, I believe. In this time frame that we're in right now, the business paradigm is very different than the one that existed, when I was 15 years old, sitting on my bed listening to Yes songs.
Yeah.
And,
Yeah.
it's a very, very different world that we live in. And I think, that social media for me has been a good thing. It's helped put me out there, and the ability to stream, the ability to work with musicians on the other side of the planet. I think you have to embrace uh, those possibilities and take advantage of them. I know that a lot of the people that are closer to my age, they're kind of back. They're still back in that time frame. You know,
Yeah.
uh,
Yeah.
and I was making $100, you know, 30 years ago to go play a gig. You know, uh, they're still paying that.
Yeah.
Inflation hasn't hit uh, in
Yeah.
that world.
I think actually, even with all of the change that has happened, we're probably still going to continue to see an evolution of change. I'm hoping it's going to kind of come back to people really valuing live performance, and maybe with all of the goggles that are coming out, with Apple coming out with that, and so you can strap on your goggles and rather than watch it on a flat screen, when you have a broadcast, people can watch it in 3D as if they're there. You set up a couple cameras or whatever they are, and then it's sort of like you're right there. And that's getting back a bit toward live performance, something like that.
People definitely enjoy seeing a performance. I think that you just want to take more care and control of how you're presenting yourself. And it's like I think you can help yourself more by you don't have to be out in a bar every week or every month, doing it. As long as you're doing things periodically. Uh, but if you're doing something, a quality presentation, I think it makes more of an impact. And I mean, I'm totally convinced, 100% convinced that it's easier to sell 100 streams than it is to get 20 people to show up at a bar and pay a cover. I just think that that's where it's headed.
Hmm.
Uh, Especially, I mean, I'm a boomer. The people that are going to appreciate what I do, uh, I'll get some from a subsequent generation, but I think that giving people a chance to sit on their couch, and do it, um, it just seems like it's a good idea for me. And I mean, we won't even talk about COVID was the worst thing, to happen for a lot of people. But for me, it was the handwriting on the wall that I needed to change
Mm.
uh, what I was doing, and I think I landed on my feet uh, with
Good,
that.
good.
And this
Well,
record took 7 years,
yeah.
but we're already working on the next one, and I'm hoping that we'll make enough money off of this soon enough to make another one. Uh, that's my hope.
Now we've only got a few minutes left, so I really wanted to ask you about your guitar gear, or how you approach recording your guitar, because I thought your guitar sounded great on this album. Can you give us some insight there?
Most of the guitar was recorded direct into the board. Um,
Okay.
there was some that was recorded on an amp, and actually, I wasn't that thrilled um, with some of the. It didn't sound like I sound.
Mm.
I have most of what I'm using these days is a Blues Deluxe, mid '90s Blues Deluxe, and a bunch of stomp boxes. Guitar wise, I have a guy name's Randy Dritz, who was the D and SD Curly. I don't know if you remember them from the '70s and the '80s. Well, he designed them and did a lot of the engineering, but he lives like 5 minutes away from me. And so I have five Fender builds that he put together for me: two Strats, two Telecasters, one P bass, and you'd probably have to spend $3,000 or $4,000 uh, with Fender on each of them to get what I got on that. I'm really
Nice.
happy with those. I have I just picked up last year a Gretsch Streamliner that I'm still fighting with. Uh, they're a little more difficult to play. And starting with it probably needs a fret job. The frets are too small, hard to bend strings with that one. But I've got a couple of Dan Electros, a 12 string, and then I've got a 6 string bass, which is fun. I haven't used it yet. I have a 12 string Hamer bass
Wow.
also that I'm planning on doing something with. And I know I've got a lap steel, the Oahu brand, and that's the lap steel that you're hearing on Forever. I'm in love with that dream,
Well, we're just about out of time, unfortunately,
but I'm not out of guitars
Kurt.
yet. Come on.
I really appreciate your taking your time out of your day to come and talk with us at Prog Chat here. And once again, that was a great interview. And sorry we got cut off there. Kurt wanted me to add thanks to Bad Dog Promotions and Melodic Revolution Records for pointing him to the channel. And he wants to expand his audience, and certainly he's going to do that, being with us in the Prog Chat. Again, I heartily recommend his. I endorse his music, his new album. I haven't heard the rest, but his new album is great, really excellent. So thanks for watching. Signing off is Prog Dog, and bye for now.